Well, the aircraft took off from Rio de Janeiro, and it headed out across the Atlantic. And as they approached the thunderstorm, what happened was that the air temperature dropped, and something called pitot tubes underneath the nose cone froze up. Now, what the tubes do is air travels into them, and the tubes turn them into a speed reading. And once they froze up, the aircraft's computers thought that the aircraft was suddenly standing still at 36,000 feet and issued a stall warning. So literally a synthesized voice comes out of the cockpit saying, "Stall, stall." And the autopilot disengaged at that point, handing control of the aircraft back to the two pilots. So up until that point, you've got a very simple equipment failure, a frozen tube. But then what followed was a sequence of human errors, it seems. When an aircraft stalls at high altitude, there's apparently a protocol whereby the pilots are meant to keep the nose 5 degrees up above the horizon, and they're meant to maintain 85 degrees of thrust. But they didn't do either of those things. There was a relatively inexperienced co-pilot at the controls, and he appears to have pulled back hard on the stick. And what he in fact did was fly the aircraft up beyond 38,000 feet.
Where the air gets very thin.
It gets very...
Can't stay up there very
Yeah,
easily.
it gets very thin. They lost lift. And the aircraft then suddenly started heading down towards the sea belly first.
Now, online, you can read leaked transcripts of the cockpit conversation.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. The pilots do not seem to know whether the plane is flying up or down. They don't know whether they're descending or ascending.
No, they don't. There's a very disturbing bit when the captain, who's actually been on a rest break, comes back into the cockpit, finds his two co-pilots in a state of complete confusion. They don't know if they're climbing or descending. The co-pilot at the controls actually thinks that he's very close to the ground and is in something called take-off, go-around mode, which would mean he'd only be a few hundred feet above the ground. So there is complete and total confusion. And out of that actually comes an interesting technical aspect of this investigation, which is that on the Airbus, the pilots only have little electronic joysticks at their sides. And the interesting thing about those is that they can't necessarily see what each other is doing. Whereas on a Boeing aircraft, even though Boeings are still fly-by-wire like the Airbus, they have a large central yoke. So both pilots are fully aware of what the other is doing, and that is not the case on the Airbus. And one of the things the report will decide today is whether that joystick design contributed or not to this disaster.